Official visit season is officially upon us. Who's going to Madison? Who is going to commit? We got a special guest joining us tonight. I'm Rajeev. He's Justin. Here we go.
Welcome to the Bucky Report, your destination for all things Wisconsin Badgers. Authentic takes.
Oh my God.
Game analysis.
Touchdown Badgers! Ring one up!
And discussion from the fan perspective.
Woo-hoo!
Thanks for joining us and on Wisconsin.
Welcome into the Bucky Report. We are your hosts, Rajeev and Justin, back together on a Sunday evening to talk about all things Wisconsin Badgers. On today's show, official visits are here. Upcoming weekend, Saturday, May 31st. We've got a litany of Badgers headed to Madison. Some already committed, some uncommitted. We're going to get into all the uncommitteds visiting this weekend. We've got a special guest joining us. We are at the Bucky Report on Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you can get your podcasts. If you like what we're doing, hit the subscribe button so you know when we make new content. Justin, it's been a long week. Thank you for doing the show last week. I was out. I was working literally the entire last weekend. Super busy. Great show with Ryan. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing all right. I'm happy. It's go time. We're finally to the visit
season. Christmas season for
this
Justin.
First weekend is always the big one. I love that. I love how the new staff kind of does it in a descending order of relevance.
Yeah, no doubt.
The first weekend is always crazy for them.
For I think the fourth time joining our show, please welcome to the show, Nick OSEN, Badgers beat reporter from 247 Sports, Badger247.com. All of his stuff is out there. Check it out. Very, very worth the paywall. He does excellent work. Nick, welcome to the show. And let's start off with this. A lot of people, that are listening to the show aren't as into recruiting as you two are and as I am. I am in less than you two are for sure. Talk a little bit about, Nick, this season, what official visits are all about, the timeline, where this is in the recruiting cycle. Give us a little lay of the land.
Absolutely. So I'll say, generally, and then get it a little bit more into kind of specifics. For those that don't follow, recruiting quite as much, Rajeev and Justin were joking a little bit like it's Christmas season. This is like prime time. Like you're looking at not quite maybe season finales, if you're watching shows and things like that. But you want this to be kind of the best point, really not only for kind of the buzz and momentum of a program, but of a recruiting cycle. So basically, if you're taking an OV from the recruit side, you're generally super interested in a school. And for the school side, especially like Justin mentioned, kind of some of the prioritized weekends potentially within there, you are very, very important and highly thought of to the school and the program. Now, generally, from my experience, this will be my first, summer doing it with Wisconsin, but several OV cycles in the past. I think that sweet spot at programs, generally for the power conference areas, I would say around probably 10 to 15, 10 to 16 uncommitted guys. And then you've got commits coming in, certainly for their OVs. Sometimes I've seen like a local commit or two just kind of not taking his official visit that weekend, but maybe he'll pop in for a practice or, not maybe a meeting or just to kind of relay some of what things are like on campus. And during these OVs, they're generally about 2 days, a full day and a half. Generally, you get in on a Friday, maybe leave on a Sunday, is certainly what I've seen. And it is just your chance to kind of, as an uncommitted recruit, live it up a little bit, get this incredible firsthand experience with other guys that are not committed. So you get kind of different perspectives, which is actually one of my favorite parts, and a part I think is super underrated. You're getting hands-on time with the staff. You're getting to see the program, the campus, what it's all about, maybe some of the food. I know that, of course, a beautiful University of Wisconsin, some of the incredible campus, a beautiful campus that it really offers. And then, of course, you are kind of getting a little more into, I'm not even going to say fit, because at this point, you generally know what that looks like, but just really good kind of firsthand views of what you can bring to a program, what they can bring to you. And hey, if you commit here, this is what that looks like. And this staff certainly did an amazing job closing last year. I'm excited to see what they can do this year. And while I don't really, break down kind of weekend by weekend, just because I think you do see some of that 4-star talent scattered, I think this week's show, this will be the week we probably talk about some of the most top 247 potential or higher 4-star guys for this couple weeks.
Yeah.
I think if you play this honestly, even from a psychology standpoint, you probably want either the first visit or the last visit. Like if first visit tells you how excited a recruit is just to get on campus, and last visit, you want that opportunity to be the last thing they see and to be the one that has the opportunity to close it.
Yeah, got to be there to close the deal. So here's what we're going to do, guys. We've got 10 uncommitted visits to Madison we're going to talk about today. We're going to go through each one. Justin and Nick are going to give their takes on there. I'll jump in on the back end if there's anything that I have that they missed, which I imagine there won't be because these guys are pretty thorough in their evaluations. And Nick's going to give us a little bit of some recruiting background, anything that he might have. Then we're also going to list out some of the committed guys that are coming here, and we'll talk about one of them specifically, Cameron Miller, because we have not talked about him yet on this show. I think Justin and I might have a little bit of differing opinion on Cameron Miller. So we're going to lead it off with.
I think Nick will be on my side on that one.
Well, we'll see here. I know Nick will, but I'm gonna challenge you guys a little bit today. Lucien Tonkara, wide receiver out of League City, Texas, composite 3-star, 6'3", 195. Upcoming visits after Madison include Kansas, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. Nick, give us a little bit of background on Tonkara and your thoughts on him.
Yeah, so I just want to say first for the fans or really anybody watching, following, these lists can change, and this is not necessarily all encompassing. No worries, my guys. I got it. There's like one name, he's tweeted like a graphic with one date, but then we did an interview that he might be coming up earlier. So just things like that. But many of these, obviously expected, locked in, and will be visiting Wisconsin. So Lucien Tonkara, a recent offer for Wisconsin. And as I'm sure you can tell by my reaction already, guys, I love this offer for the Badgers. I don't think we necessarily have him underrated perhaps, but I do think he's a 4-star talent. I could see him getting there with a good senior year. I'm really impressed not only by the player, but the person. I spoke with him just after getting the offer. I think he'd be an incredible fit with the Badgers. And, told me something. Basically, I tweeted it, so it's out there in the story, that this was a potential dream offer for him. And he got it. Coach Kenny Guyton, Pat Lambert, Luke Fickell, like the staff have done a really good job here, not only with the obvious offer, but building a baseline relationship prior to that. I'm hearing that more and more from some of these players. I think of a lot of wideouts that say it. And I think he'd just be a really nice fit. He's got good size, good ball skills. He's definitely working on kind of some of that speed and versatility too, from what I have been seeing just in these workout clips. Really impressive kid. And in terms of the recruitment, yeah, you mentioned a few of those visits, Rajeev, and there was one that he was like maybe working on or kind of working to finalize a date. But you hit on some of the top contenders. I would certainly handicap this mostly as like Wisconsin, Arkansas, maybe Kansas, because they have been recruiting well, as we've seen, and we know what Lance Leipold can do there. But
Lance Leipold's a beast.
But I personally, when I finished up that call, I wrote the story, I put it out to the readers, and I said I wouldn't be, shocked to see a crystal ball on this end for Wisconsin. It wouldn't shock me to see him take all his visits. But as of right now, I love where Wisconsin sits, and just even looking at some of kind of the social media stuff, which I try not to track too often, but just kind of some of the love he's showing to certain programs and fans. I think Wisconsin sits in an encouraging spot going into the weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna weigh in on this. When I watched the film, the first thing I thought of right off the bat was this is the offensive Snowden. Like they move so similarly on their film when you watch it from his senior year to this. They just that lanky body style where they haven't quite fully grown into their body yet. And you can see that when the strength comes in with the athleticism, like the guy's just going to be a beast out on the field. I think he's got – people were asking who I compare him to, and I'm like, he kind of moves a little like Plaxico Burress. Like just the way that gallop, he's got kind of that gallop to him. He's not as big, but he's got kind of that long galloping stride when you watch him run, where it's like you can kind of see that same body movement with the way that they move out on the field. Because people were asking, like, who do you compare him to? I'm like, well, Burris was kind of a one of one. Like, I've never seen another receiver really move like that. And this guy kind of has a little bit of that kind of the style of athleticism, the way he kind of tracks on the field.
And good at tracking the ball too, from what I have seen.
Yep.
You know that he's going against some really good competition. Like I've followed, when you see a kid gets offered and then plenty of like local coaches or maybe his coach, trainer shares his stuff. Like, that these guys have seen plenty of talent coming around. And again, I want to hit on an incredible fit, not just on the field, but like this kid was he was so, locked in, focused on this conversation. And it was clear an offer from Wisconsin meant a lot to him. So I was excited, to see it, to catch up with him, of course. And yeah, I think for a lot of reasons, kind of like what Justin said, I think multitude of levels would be a nice fit, especially as we later talk about a guy like Cam Miller alongside somebody like him. Yeah. It doesn't get much better than that for what Longo's trying to do.
His best ball is ahead for him for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The physical tools are certainly there. 6'3", that's a great frame that you want there on the outside. Let's move off of wide receiver, go to tight end. Naai Davis, another composite 3-star tight end out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Let's go, Indiana. And by the way, I love how many people we got. We got a lot of connections going on in Indianapolis right now, and I like to see that because there's a lot of talent out of Indiana, my home state. Go Colts. But really good to see there. Out of Indianapolis, Indiana, Kansas and Purdue are teams that we look to be competing with for Naai Davis. Justin, what are your initial thoughts on Mr. Davis?
I absolutely love his film. I think he's a 4-star. Like this kid, he's pretty projectable to me when you look at it. The athleticism is there, and he's more physical than he probably would get credit for. I think you'd call him he's more of a flex tight end, but he's a guy who I compared him to Lance Kendricks. I think they're similar. He's bigger than him, and I think Kendricks was a little faster, but it's a similar type of guy where he's clearly better at being split out, but he's a willing blocker, a guy who is not afraid to get physical coming down on the edge, who I think will play in the running game if he gets some time and some training to play that. But the athleticism is there for him to scream up the seam. Like he's a guy that has a ton of length and he can really run.
Yeah, for those that maybe just listen later or maybe aren't as locked into watching us here live, I smile right away often because Justin and we agree on so much film, Rajeev. It's just kind of funny. I agree with that flex spot. I think that he's got the physicality to also play in the run game. Honestly, he was one of the first players I really talked to when I got back to Wisconsin. Good basketball player, a nice athletic background there. Plays against some solid competition. Rajeev, shout out to the Indianapolis area. Has long been really kind of, high on and impressed with Wisconsin. My colleague Evan Flood caught up with him after his most recent visit. And again, it's been pretty consistent that the Badgers have been a true, team to watch here. I like the Lance Kendricks comp. Obviously, he was an incredible player. But I do think Naai has that type of potential. He was coming off of an injury. I think some of the conversations were maybe a little bit slower with some teams out there in his recruitment, but the buzz is very much picked back up, throughout the spring. I would say I'm pretty comfortable projecting Wisconsin over Kansas there from just kind of speaking with him before and what I've read. I think Purdue is a potential team to watch, but again, he's a guy that I would not be shocked at all if he is a Badger. Max Steinecker, Nate Letton, and the staff doing a nice job there. I remember he really liked Nate Letton, and from what I understand, Letton is a guy he's really good at connecting with these players, especially either on the visits or maybe going to see them at their respective schools.
Yeah, listen, I think Davis really moves really well for a tight end, and obviously you guys talked about the flex run blocking. I think it's really important that we focus on not just pass catching tight ends, the guys that can actually do in the run game. He's 6'4", he's going to fill out, he's going to be a big guy. His blocks on film are just incredible, and like that, he's willing
to be physical for sure.
Absolutely, and I love that, and that's the kind of tight end that we really need. In addition to the kind of tight ends that we're building in that room right now, very pass catching, you really got to have the guys that can beef up and really be good in the blocking running game, because that's always going to be a big part of any Longo offense or any Wisconsin offense. The next one, we're going to go offensive line now. So we're going to start with Justin on this one again. Nolan Davenport, 6'6", 260 pounds, out of Massillon, whatever, Ohio. Michigan State, Penn State, and Missouri are visits that he's upcoming, and Penn State looks to be kind of in the driver's seat. Curious what you think about this one, Nick. Nolan Davenport. Justin, lead us off here. Talk to us about this offensive lineman.
Yeah, a big physical dude who actually moves really well. He's light on his feet, and he's not afraid to mix it up. So he is I've kind of been trying to track this against last year's group, which was actually, I think, one of the better groups that Wisconsin signed in probably close to a decade. I think that I feel really strongly that it's a good class. This guy would be at home in that class. Like he's a really strong candidate for being a guy that this is one that we need to hit on. I don't know if we will. Like you said, Penn State's up there on this one, and they're probably leaning. I trust this staff. The staff has some magic to them a little bit, and they might be able to pull something off because they know how to knock it out of the park. I would love to see them get this one done. This would be a big get for them. This would be a guy that's, in terms of the offensive line class, is probably a difference maker. And I think they're still looking for that guy. I think Royski has a lot of upside to him as being a potential 4-star guy down the road. This guy definitely does, clearly. And I think that you build that because Cam, what's his last? Cam Clark.
Cam Clark, yes, sir.
Cam Clark.
He's a little more raw. This guy's a little bit more developed at this point where you can project him a little bit easier. And I think that this is one of those where you look at and it's like, this is a guy who might be able to play, maybe not freshman year, but by redshirt freshman year, he's probably in your 2 deep, providing some value.
Yeah, I think that's a really good breakdown, Justin. You know, this is a guy I was waiting for kind of some more offers to come for him, including for the Badgers in his process. You know, it's interesting. I personally have not seen a lot of interviews done with Nolan Davenport. So harder to get a gauge in that sense, but some good competition. Specifically, I would probably say, Penn State and Missouri in terms of programs. But from what I understand, Michigan State has done a nice job here. If you guys are on my boards, which I know you two are, it feels like every week, maybe 2 times a week, I'm talking to somebody that has great things to say about Coach Blazek and his relationship building. So I'm not going to be one.
I really like his
energy. Yep. And I know we'll be getting deeper in that for the next visit for a couple big time guys that we've talked about. But, with Nolan Davenport, I personally think he's a pro. I think he will end up a 4-star. Have a little more, kind of background on the football side than the recruiting, just because haven't spoken with him as much. I think he's a starter by year 2 or year 3 in a program, regardless of where he ends up. And I would put this, I think probably a clear-cut top 3. I don't think I would have, at least from what I have seen and just kind of how his visits are set up, maybe put Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan State a little bit higher for him than Missouri, just from what I can tell. But really impressive player. He's somebody that's taken a big jump since kind of last year or since the winter. I think his body has filled out well. I think his technique is really, really coming along. And I think, quite honestly, whoever gets him, getting a 4-star, top 300, 350 type player in the country.
Yeah, you talk about a frame that's got a lot of room to grow. I mean, he's 6'6", 260 right now. That can easily be, 300 frame, and he's going to be
310 eventually.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's definitely that kind of a guy. The offer list is obviously going to be difficult to manage, but I agree with you, Justin. I mean, that's the kind of guy we need. Technique is really good, pad level is good, everything looks really good on film. So hopefully we can get that. Another offensive line. We'll come to you first on this one, Nick. Logan Powell, composite 3-star. However, you have him as a 4-star on 247. 6'4", 280-pound offensive lineman from Phoenix, Arizona. He has a visit with Alabama coming up after his visit to Madison. So that's certainly going to be, got Alabama, Tennessee, Arizona, and Arizona State. He's from Phoenix, obviously, so those Arizona schools are going to be involved. But Alabama looks to be playing heavy with this guy, Logan Powell. Nick, give us your assessment of him and his recruiting process. Do you feel like we got a chance with this guy?
Yeah. So actually I mentioned Powell as somebody before the show I wanted to make sure to hit on, because I didn't see a ton of interviews out there. And, I was able to speak with him week and a half ago. And so it's interesting. He put out a top 5. I'm not going to list the schools specifically there, but the schools that were in the top 5 are a little bit different from some of the OVs he's taking. So Wisconsin obviously is one that he's taking for an OV. He mentioned Arizona to me, Oklahoma, and then Alabama. There's potential there. Now, Oklahoma, I think with some of their, prowess in terms of the offensive line and really in the trenches, I think they're always a school to watch. But from what I can tell, this kid is very excited to get to Madison, get around Coach Blas more, really more of the staff. I think he's somebody that would fit, kind of the culture as well as just the city of Madison. Well, it sounds like unless he's staying in state with the Wildcats, which he might, but unless he's doing that, he's going to be traveling far anywhere he goes. Oklahoma, decent amount, certainly Bama, certainly Wisconsin. So I think this is one of those wild card, really type players that you hadn't heard as much about until I think maybe late spring. Then he drops the top 5, and then, of course, sets this visit that he shared with me recently. So I think it's going to be a big one. He's a guy that I probably would expect to take a couple more visits, but I think he'd be a really nice fit. And he talked to me a little bit, so this is kind of some of that exclusive stuff about he prides himself on his versatility. I'm curious where you guys would maybe put him. He feels like he'd maybe be more naturally along the interior at a guard spot in college, but told Coach Blazik and me as well when I did the interview, he feels like he can play anywhere. He'd like to have a chance to play early. I think academics as well as just relationship building, really important for Powell.
I feel like he definitely seems like an inside kind of guy for me. I mean, just from the film and everything, obviously his size as well. But Justin, your thoughts on Logan Powell?
Yeah, I think he's got some versatility. I like the kid. Do you know, was he a reoffer? Was he a Washington initially and then DeBoyer reoffered when he went to Bama? I'm curious how long they've been on him.
I think that he held don't quote me on it, but I thought that he held the offer before that.
Okay. Oh, so he had the Bama offer for, okay. Interesting.
I believe so. And that would line up with kind of the rating as well. We have him as the top 247 kid, I believe.
Oh, it wasn't necessarily that. I was just curious if that was a staff that the offer followed him from Washington down to
okay.
Bama. Because that would kind of tell you kind of what that staff thought about him if it was something where he was one of their top guys there. Yeah, everything I had heard kind of on him was that he's a little more wide open, which is in our favor there. We get a chance to make a really big first impression. I think that what you're going to see, and one of the things I love about this staff is they come on strong and they make it kids feel very valued. Now, obviously, Bama is capable of doing that too. I'm really curious to see if they hit the ground running with recruiting there, because this is a staff that is really having to. They're basically hitting a new level for them at Alabama in terms of the expectations, because Washington and Alabama are completely different animals when you talk about the recruiting and the prowess that's required to run that program. So it'll be really interesting if DeBoyer is ready to really dial into that level, like what we were seeing under Saban, where it was just like an absolute machine when they were running things. I think that this is one I would love to see us get done. I think that these are two really big between him and Davenport. If they can lock those two down, like you've basically done your job for the cycle. Like that's a really strong offensive line class. I think if you get those two, you have 4 guys. I don't know. Is it going to be 4 or 5? I think we might just sit on 4 at that point.
I think because numbers can be flexible, I'll say this. If they can lock those 2 down, which would bring it to 4, that is a heck of a class. Mm-hmm. I certainly think you'd still need to have Hardy Watts visit, though.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Obviously,
sure. I think he's a take no matter what kind of guy.
Yeah, we know how impressive that young man is, and the fact we reported last week before that was out there, that he's visiting Wisconsin with the amount of offers he has and the schools that want him. Mm-hmm. But we'll get more into that next week.
Yeah, yeah, he's a next week kind of guy for sure. Yeah, listen, I mean, I think both those 2 guys would be great, but Nolan Davenport scares me because Penn State tends to compete quite well with us with offensive linemen, as we've seen recently.
They've competed quite well with the previous staff. I don't know. Have they butted? We kind of traded blows between
Sexton was obviously
and the other one. Yeah,
it was a little bit of a mix. It was a mix, but you're right.
They took a guy from us. We took Haywood from them, who now looks like he might be the best player that was involved between either staff. I mean, you know how I feel about Haywood. The guy's absolutely going to be a complete monster for us. I absolutely love it. Before we move on to defense, thank you to all. There's over 75 of you watching us live right now. Dark Ray's in here. John Berger's in here. Pavel. There's so many people in here. If you have questions for Nick, by the way, toss them in here. We'll star them when we finish this defensive list. We'll see if Nick has any time for some questions before we leave. Let's go to defense, guys. Nick, will come to you first on this one. Jaden Woods, composite 4-star. Boy, does this guy have some good looking film. Edge guy, 6'3", 240 out of Shawnee, Kansas. Visits coming up with him are Penn State, Tennessee, and Purdue.
Purdue looks to be in play. He is from Kansas, but still, I mean, there's a lot of teams he has a huge offer list. I mean, really, really nice to see though. What are your thoughts on Jaden Woods, Nick?
Yeah, I've got a lot to say, on this one. So I'm fortunate
Can
to
I jump in here real quick before you say it? I feel irrationally confident about this one for some reason. I don't know why. I just feel good vibes about our situation.
So with Jaden Woods, unfortunately, I got to know him a little bit while I was at Iowa State. They were one of the first offers. And guys, I'm not sure you'll find another player in the class with a better offer list. I mean,
it's amazing.
Sure, there are maybe a couple, but yeah, everybody really that you can think of. So the fact, I remember when he was coming for the visit and the job that, Max, like I mentioned earlier, Coach Mitchell, Coach Tressel, the job they've done here to even get an OV is big time. And he's a really, you mentioned somebody being wide open. I think you said Logan Powell. From my understanding, speaking with Jaden, this is really open. I think the OVs are actually going to settle this. And that's why it is so important, like you mentioned, Justin, to make such a big impact. I think I would probably put like Wisconsin, Purdue, Penn State, maybe a shade above a couple of the other schools. Mm-hmm. I should mention he told me he was working on a visit to Florida. He told me that about a week and a half ago. So potentially 2 SEC visits within there. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned his size. He can move. He's physical. He's athletic.
Either time.
Believe that he used to wrestle. Really kind of complete background. Again, a kid that I've really just enjoyed, and appreciated the time and kind of following this recruitment. One of those you kind of see from start to finish over the course of a couple of years. I would put Wisconsin up there with anyone, but I would mention and handicap again. I think this one is like a 20-25% each school if you were just doing kind of some projections. Right now, I certainly could see a spot where maybe he doesn't call it like this weekend, but then ends up a Badger. I don't think, we talk about a bunch of players regardless of position. I know we'll talk about another guy at linebacker or like Remington Moss, who's already committed, or even like Jameer Scott, like these perfect fits for the Tressel defense. Man, this staff could really have fun with a guy like Jaden Woods.
I 100% agree. He's grown on me a little bit as the cycle's gone on, and more with his just getting more locked in with his speed numbers and stuff like that I've seen from some of the camps that have come out, where it makes me feel a little bit better about him athletically. The staff is changing the way that they're doing the outside linebacker position compared to what we're used to with the Badgers. It seems they want almost like a big physical hand in the dirt, and almost like a down lineman on one side, and the other side they want kind of that guy who's comfortable in space, like the Brandon Ains that's in this class. And they're kind of setting it up that way. And I think they're going to do some interesting things defensively based off of it, where we're going to it's going to almost run like a 4-3 in some ways based off of the type of guys. Like Latouche seems like that type of guy too. Like he's got that frame where you look at him and he's probably going to be a guy that's a little more comfortable rushing than being a guy dropping. Because he's going to be a big guy. Like he's going to really struggle to really drop in space once he actually fills out. So I look at these guys and it's like, that's fine. If they're top end pass rushers, it doesn't matter. Like realistically, that's going to be their job. And then you just get to play some games with them and maybe drop them occasionally to throw teams off, because I think we'd all agree Ains can come screaming off the edge too. So
yeah. We already know
interesting to do. Yeah.
Regardless of what this summer looks like, this linebacker class has a lot of potential.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just continuing with the theme of adding more and more linebackers into this great university. Let's keep it going. Listen, I like this guy a lot. Smart, instinctual, plays with really good vision.
Great
and
hands.
I feel like every single thing he does, it just looks effortless. Jaden Woods looks effortless out there. I mean, I know he's playing in Kansas, not playing against the greatest competition, but when you watch this guy play, you just see that you see his frame and his body translate to the next level really easily. And the way that the vision that he plays with is really, really great. So yeah, very excited about him. And I mentioned he was a composite 4-star. Next up, Mason Posa. This is a guy I really, really like, by the way. 6'3", 210-pound linebacker out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. 4-star. Rivals has him as a 3, but whatever. This guy looks like a 4-star for sure. Oregon and Texas A&M are schools that we're going to be competing with offers. and visits coming up to both of those schools. That's interesting. And while I'm going to come to you on this, Nick, too, and I'm actually curious on one other thing, talking about Mason Posa, but also Oregon is doing some really interesting recruiting in the Midwest. I feel like now that you can see them like infiltrating a lot of these offer lists, the same as the guys that we have. Now we often will offer the same guys as that, but I am interested to hear your take, just in both of you guys, on how Oregon is kind of infiltrating their way into the Big Ten. I mean, look, they are pretty much now a powerhouse program in the Big Ten with Michigan and Ohio State. Oregon's up there. But that's going to be really interesting. We're going to be competing with Oregon for some of these guys, and of course, continuing to down the line. And I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about that. But Mason Posa, man, this guy, athleticism is off the absolute charts. I love this guy. I really hope we get him. I'm going to just go first on this guy because I want to talk about him. Sideline to sideline speed is something that I really value at this position, and I just feel like it's something that our team has been missing. But the recruits that are in the linebacker room now and the recruits that we're looking at, I love seeing this kind of sideline to sideline speed. He has such a motor on him. And I feel like the instincts that he plays with and how quickly he can chase down plays is something that really will fit well into this system. But Nick, Mason Posa.
Yeah, again, a lot to say about a guy like Mason Posa. Very fortunate, like I always mention with this position, to be able to speak with him multiple times this spring. We got him. We reported he was coming to town, then big breakdown on his visit. I'll start from the recruiting side, then hit a little bit of football. Look, this is basically a 3-team race. I wouldn't say a school like Texas Tech is out. Texas Tech is one of his expected OBs. He told me at least a couple weeks back. But I would mostly have this as a Wisconsin, Texas A&M, Oregon type race.
Yeah.
No real
Oklahoma
order.
State maybe for him potentially.
Probably not. Again, maybe not saying out, but it would surprise me. And look, guys, I mean, he got really the full experience, seeing practice, seeing the energy, time around the staff, successful linebackers, seeing more of kind of the school's feel and the campus. History is big to him, like a student of the game, somebody I really enjoyed speaking with. I don't want to get people's hopes up because I know, at least for our readers, and Justin, I just go to you because I know you comment on things. I'm not sure there's a guy on the list. I mean, maybe Byron Lewis, but out of anybody that Badgers fans want more than this young man in Mason Posa to be a Badger. And I don't want to get anybody too hyped up, but I think I like Wisconsin's chances going into this month. I just think relationship building has been so important there, and the staff deserves credit for that. And just in terms of football, I don't need to add a ton more. Great player, tough, physical, athletic would be a nice fit. I'll defer to you guys a little bit more on that. But just for fans to know, I'm not going to put in a crystal ball, but I'm very encouraged for the Badgers' chances.
Yeah, I would say if we were going to talk must-gets in this group, he's one of them for me. I think that he's a guy that absolutely elevates the class if you get him in there. This is a guy that when you talk about blue chip difference maker type players on defense, he's one of those guys. I think that there's very little chance that he ends up being a bust down the road. I think the athleticism there, I think the intensity is there from him. I do my feel for this one feels like this staff is absolutely killing this recruitment, which I think Oregon is probably doing a pretty nice job. But I think if I had to say based off of how it feels like Wisconsin's got a little bit of an edge. And I think that this is one of those situations Wisconsin has to kill this weekend. Try to end it before he gets an opportunity to go anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I think that's a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think if they kill this visit, there's a chance that they could lock him down before he leaves Madison.
Zombie Panda 7 says, saw Posa live after the game. He went out of his way to shake my hand when he saw me in a UW jacket. That's something we like to see. Yeah, listen, Mason Posa is one of those guys that if he hits and if he's going to sign with us, we're going to celebrate. We're going to talk about it a lot. We're going to have a lot of things to say about his game. And yeah, he's the kind of guy that we would absolutely love to have here. One comment I wanted to mention earlier, I had this note and then I forgot to mention it. Justin, you brought up about Logan Powell and his offer to Alabama. You were correct, and actually Washington offered him, and then he did not get Alabama's offer until the coach moved over. So that is a note that I wanted to clarify. Good call on that. Good breaking that down. All right, let's move on. Another outside linebacker, edge player, Jayden Loftin, 6'4", 240 pounds, out of Somerville, New Jersey.
Justin's guy here.
That's right. Big offers and visits coming after us to Nebraska and Penn State. Penn State, Nebraska. Both Penn State looks to be in a pretty good position, and once again competing with Penn State here. Jayden Loftin, 247, has a 4-star. What do you think, Justin? Give me your breakdown on this guy.
Yeah, I had been announced how frustrated I was when we missed out on Gordy Salfstead. I had not dove as much into Loftin as I probably should have at that point. Having watched him now after the fact, I think he's going to be a defensive lineman here. He feels like that to me. I mean, he's 6'4.5", I think, right now.
6'4.5", 240.
240.
Yep.
I'll be shocked because he's already the weight that you'd want him at. So he's probably going to fill out to at least 260. And I don't think it's that hard to get him to 270 and have him just play 5-tech, which I think I watched the film. Almost all his films got his hand down. So that to me tells me, all right, they're probably looking at him as a defensive lineman. And because honestly, with this staff, I just don't think they have to take guys who are projection guys where it's like, well, let's see if he can do it kind of guys. They don't seem like that kind of staff. They seem like I see an athlete that is already playing some stand-up that we can develop, and he's raw now, but we'll get it. And this guy doesn't feel like – he feels more like a defensive lineman that you want to build up. Like he's going to need some weight, but he has got the athleticism to really be a problem on the edge. I love his film. I think this is out of this group that's coming this weekend, he's my number one must-get guy. This is a guy who absolutely starts off that defensive line class and gives you somebody who can be a guy who's disruptive and can cause problems in the backfield. He's got a great frame. He's got a ton of length. He's really athletic. This is a guy who can be a problem. And you know, I think if you can pair him with a guy like Peterzak, who's coming next week, that's a huge start to the defensive line class. That would be about as good as it gets for Wisconsin this cycle.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking that there's maybe one more OV for him, Rajeev. I could be mistaken. Maybe it's just not put out there. I know that Tennessee was a school at least involved there.
Tennessee's involved. I haven't seen a date on an OV yet, but they are involved, yeah. For
sure. But Penn State, like you mentioned, yeah, major school to watch there. Nebraska, I think, has been kind of some of the more recent buzz. Yeah. So I would probably think, I mean, obviously Nebraska's Big Ten too, but I think Badgers, Penn State, some of the key contenders. Agree with a lot of what you said, Justin, in terms of his physicality, his potential. I think there are a couple guys, that I'd have as potential must-gets. You know, Post is high up there for me, probably one of those O-linemen. But Lofton's a difference maker, man. Mm-hmm. And again, getting to speak with him probably about a month ago and just, following his recruitment like a leader.
Recruitment.
There's
not a lot out there.
Somebody that he's got this rating, right? A good rating.
And he just jumped. He just jumped a 4-star in 247.
He's out at these camps. He's already got all these offers. He's putting in the time, the competition. I just love following recruits like that. I think he'd be a great fit. I'd probably think, that he probably makes it to at least another visit. But, man, you put a guy like him wherever, like you mentioned, Justin, with some of the names you mentioned, probably a guy you see playing in the first couple of years.
I'd agree with that. He's got the athleticism. That room is hungry for some guys like this that have the athleticism that he has. So if he can prove that he can be technically sound and disciplined, he'll get on the field quickly.
Yeah, definitely a good talent. Let's move on to quarterback now. We got a few of these guys. We'll start with Mason Alexander, 4-star recruit. However, 247, Nick has him listed as a 3-star, 6 foot, 180 pounds, out of, once again, Indianapolis, Indiana, Fishers to be exact. Pittsburgh is an upcoming official visit. Purdue is another team that's heavily involved. Your thoughts on Mason Alexander? And Nick, he's only a 3-star on your site, but he's 4 on everywhere else. Why is he only a 3 on your site? And what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think I'll give a little more of the recruiting side. And sure. Justin, I know the film is fresh for him there. So I actually, this was before we really all became friends, guys, especially Rajeev. I hadn't talked with you a ton yet. Back in the winter, man, I actually went out there. I met Eugene Hilton, did an interview, met Mason Alexander. So I will tell you, I like his size. Those measurements are pretty legit. A good frame, great range, kind of stood out to me with Mason. Really an in-depth interview we did. I'm not sure there's a better school, or there's a school that has recruited Mason better than the Badgers have. Just in terms of relationship building, painting a picture of what he could really be and fit like in this defense. I would probably put the Badgers 1A, maybe Purdue 1B. Pittsburgh has a little bit of buzz just overall, not necessarily as a leader coming in the last few weeks, but this is major, not a package deal per se, but he's very close with wideout Eugene Hilton, who, this is kind of fresh for the show. We were texting earlier, and he's likely going to be coming now that second weekend. Hilton is not the first. They were probably going to come together. But again, I think Wisconsin's in a really good spot. I think he'd be a pretty good fit in this defense. And I know Justin just watched the film this week too.
Yeah, he's interesting to me. He's not, when you talk about a guy who like is the absolute physical freak show, we think obviously Snowden or Xavier Lucas, who's, good Lord, that kid's got NFL
different level
projection already at this point. When you look
Lucas
at him,
should be way higher.
he should be a mid 4-star based off of his measurables right now. And he's played a ton of high-end competition. Alexander is interesting to me because he's not a guy who plays exclusively on the outside like you'd expect. There's a lot of slot time in his film, plays some safety in it, a little field side. So I look at him and he's harder for me to get a feel for what they actually want to use him as. There's a little Jameer Scott in his film in terms of looking at it like how he's being used in his high school team. So he's hard to get a feel for in terms of how the Badgers evaluate him. Now, I will say this. He looks like a guy who's really comfortable playing in zone coverage, does a good job playing with face up. I would like to see a little bit more of him dropping in man in coverage and makes plays. I mean, the first two highlights that he's got, he returns, he's got pick sixes for his first two highlights on his huddle. Now, obviously, that you take that with a grain of salt to an extent because that's not how it's going to play out at the college level.
I mean, a lot of guys have those on their huddle film.
So there's some tools there for sure. I would like to see more of him and see what his senior film looks like to know really like if he's going to be a guy who knows what he has for teammates. It's possible he had another 4-star corner that's in this cycle that just went out. So sometimes that's the case with guys. They get shifted around based off of who's on their team, and he's got an opportunity to maybe be the stud this next year. There's tools. He's got some versatility, and I think the staff, that there's one thing I will say about the staff, they love guys who are versatile, that they can move around, and if they have an opportunity to play him in the slot or play him at safety or have options, they're going to do it. They just want athletes on the field.
And I just want to know real quick, Rajeev, I know the time is flying, man. So I'm going to stick it with you guys longer than we said. It's just fun talking with you guys. But Alexander, you hit on it, Justin, same wavelength. But going off that versatility, he prides himself on it. And he told me, on the record in my story from February, March, whenever I got out there, he's open to playing wherever. Mm-hmm. Corner, field side, inside, slot, a little bit of safety. Like, I like how he can hit too, which is something we didn't talk about as much. So just worth noting. I love when players are so open with that. I think he fits at probably 3 spots in college.
And one more thing I'll throw in there before this. I don't think the staff necessarily feels like they have to hit on a ton of corners this cycle. I think they did a really good job the last one. I think you get 3 guys in Agard, Lucas, and Harper who all have a high upside that you feel comfortable with, that you're like, well, if I only get 1 or 2 guys and I get a couple of guys with some versatility, it's okay. Like if these guys end up at safety, fine. Because I think that room is really getting strong.
Loved your take on Harper when I did that recent feature. It's like Rajeev, he kind of feels like the forgotten guy sometimes because you've got Agard who had, 30, 35 offers like from all over, wherever. Mm-hmm. And then Lucas, who, again, should be a mid 4-star. Harper, I watch his football. I watch some of his hoops film.
He's a really good athlete.
He could be an NFL player.
He's slightly more raw than the other two, but he is a really good athlete. And he like I said, he'd be a number. And if we were under Paul Chryst still as a corner prospect for him, people would be talking about him as like how incredible he was.
Yep.
I've learned to trust this staff when it comes to cornerback.
Yes.
They've been impressing me. So if listen, What I would say about Mason Alexander is I want to see more, right? He still has another season left, so we'll see what he does. I agree with Justin. I want to see more on film. I want to see what his senior highlights look like, because I think there is an athlete there, but I just haven't seen enough. And there's that's a theme with some of these.
I want him to prove he can be a lockdown at the high school level on the outside. That's what I want to see.
Right.
I want to see him just absolutely shut down somebody for his senior season and look at it and be like, all right, we're seeing a lot more man coverage out of him, and I want to see him prove it.
Another quarterback we're going to talk about, Raheem Stroud, 3-star quarterback out of Tampa, Florida, 5'11", 160. Pittsburgh and USF seem to be the players that we're going to be competing against for Raheem Stroud. Justin, your take on Mr. Stroud?
Well, Mr. Stroud can really run is the first thing I'll say. He's got a big, lanky frame. He's a little different than Lucas. He's not as developed physically. He's a guy who's going to take a little bit of time to put some weight on. But he can really run, and he's got the length that you want at that position. He's probably, I would say, a legit 6'1". He's a tall kid.
Yeah.
And he's got some length to him. But he's also, I think, what did he run? Like a 10.6, 100? Somewhere in that range?
He can fly.
So this staff has put a premium clearly on speed. They want a ton of it. They want speed and length in the defensive backfield. And Stroud definitely has that. He's a guy who I think projects really well, and they'll have time to sit on him for a season or two before he'll have to actually get on the field, and they can get him up to like the 180 range where you feel comfortable with him out there. And he's a guy who I think can project as potentially a shutdown type guy with the length and speed that he'll have.
Yeah, maybe, not the same build, but just in terms of career trajectory, right? Maybe that of Rico Holman. Maybe a little bit slower for a couple years. Yeah. But then it can be the guy by like year 3, back after year 3. He can fly. I've gotten to know him a little bit, more than kind of some of the guys I've talked about tonight. He's a worker. Man, he loves the game, at plenty of 7-on-7 things. Really bonded well with the staff on a spring visit. I will note, just as we always want to be accurate, OB dates can change. So I believe on his graphic, it was going to be the second weekend. But then I caught up with him after his spring visit here, and he implied that he was coming that first weekend. So that would be this weekend. He'll be here one of the next 2 from that. I would anticipate it's this upcoming, but just wanted to make sure to say that. I like what you said about the pressure or lack thereof at corner in this class. However, I would personally peg Wisconsin as a leader right now for Stroud. And I think that if they think as
he's
highly
the guy that I would say is the guy that's a definite corner for them.
Yes, in terms of just position-wise, because there's versatility, yes. He'll be a corner. I know my guys in Florida have him rated well. They've got him, at least at last check, as a 4-star with us.
So I think that's legit. I think that's accurate.
All right, let's finish it off here with the quarterbacks. Composite 3-star Trey Pothit, 6'1", $175 out of Verona, Wisconsin. Tennessee is official visits coming up actually right after ours. We'll start with you on this one, Nick. Trey Pothit, let's finish off the uncommitted guys.
Yeah, so Trey Pothit, he is a guy I really respect. This about him. He talked about kind of quiet, recruitments for, I think we said Loftin and maybe others out there. It's been quiet around Trey Pothit. I know that it can be tough to kind of get, in depth with some of these areas. And obviously he's a great basketball player. I saw him live, I think 3 times in football and twice in basketball, once or twice. Good athleticism, really kind of impresses when you see, what he can do, certainly with the ball in his hands. Like one of the more versatile just in terms of actually having the ball. They use him on offense, defense, special teams. Like he can do it all. From what I understand, so his father, Hank Pothit, coach at Iowa State, I have not heard like whether they're really trying to push for, potentially playing with his dad, because his dad's not just at Iowa State. He's a corners coach, which of course would be heavily involved. Tennessee has done a nice job. I think Wisconsin's done a terrific job. I'm just not convinced that he maybe like wants to stay home as much. Obviously he wasn't always in Wisconsin. He's been at Verona the last few years. I know Justin gets what I'm saying. I can say from being firsthand, either speaking with him or being at his games, he had talked about, implied, or I had heard that the SEC had some, real potential or meaning to him. I remember Alabama was checking in, and he was pretty excited about that. But I I think he probably is a Badger or a Volunteer. And I think the buzz is generally around Tennessee the last couple months from what I've seen.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that too. That's kind of the buzz that I've kind of heard around a little bit too. He's interesting because to me, out of the corners that they have coming in this cycle, he kind of fits more with the old staff, really valued more than this staff. Not that he's a bad athlete, but he's not an absolute speedster like the guys that they seem to be really chasing after with this staff. And he's got decent length, but I don't know if he's necessarily that super lanky build like some of the guys that we have coming now. He's a guy who's very technically sound, does a nice job from that perspective, and he's got a good feel for the game. It'll be interesting. I just don't know how to take it because we've been on him now for a couple of years, and it just seems like we've never had a ton of traction with him in terms of feeling like Wisconsin's a front runner on this. And that was even with his dad on staff. So I look at it kind of like one of those things where it's like, I start reading the tea leaves on it. And it's like, if you don't seem like you're somebody who's sold on it at this point, and you've got connections like that, it's kind of like one of those things where I'm just reading the way things seem to be leaning. And it seems like you're probably not coming here.
And Justin, I smile again because as I continue to get to know you guys, I'm always kind of in agreement with like how you put that out there. I think that was super well said. Although I'll push back with maybe why hasn't he committed to Tennessee? Because I know that fair. He visited there this spring. So maybe he's a guy. I mean, I do know, him in the program well enough that
or he's waiting on somebody yet.
During football, he was focused on football. During hoops, it was time for hoops. You know what I mean? So I don't think recruiting has always been at the forefront. And I think we'll see that with kids, how we saw it with Ernest Willard Jr. last year. And obviously he ended up at Wisconsin. So, we'll see. I think he would be, just because I know that I've seen firsthand more than some of these guys what he can do. I think that the staff would find a terrific way to use him. Mm-hmm. I like his versatility. I love his knowledge of the game, feel for the game. Obviously, a great feel, probably playing since he was 3 or 4, learning from a pro in his father. Really enjoyed Trey, getting to know him a little bit. I would probably give the edge to Tennessee, but that is just because of what we have kind of heard. I don't doubt what the staff can do at all getting him on campus.
So there you have it. Those are our 10 uncommitted guys that are coming up to Madison this weekend. Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Of this list that we just talked about, I'm not going to ask Nick this question because he sometimes has inside information he might not want to share. But Justin, give me 3 guys of this list that you think will commit to Wisconsin that we've talked about tonight. Give me 3. If you had to pick 3 that you think are going to commit, then I'm going to go after you. Give me your 3.
Sure. I will say Davis.
Davis, okay.
Yep, I think Mason Posa. And let's see here.
No way this guy's about to say my exact 3, Rajeev. Because I will play this. No,
all right.
And I think Tonkara.
Oh my God. So there's nothing wrong because obviously, you guys are on my board, and I won't ever reveal too much. And I swear on my name, those were the 3. I'll just take it in order with Justin. Davis. Like I said, Wisconsin has been
a priority. There's a reason he's on the first weekend. They want him.
And I think that he fits what Letton is trying to do really well. Mason Posa, I don't think I would have necessarily said it over the winter. I mean, he told me himself that it had been so long since he got to campus. Like, he said that, and that, he liked the Badgers, but they maybe weren't at that forefront. Now I'd put them no lower than top 2. And I think with guys like Max and Coach Tressel and Coach Fickell and the wrestling and the whole staff, I really think that he ends up in Wisconsin as of now, but I'm not pegging him to commit this weekend at all. And then Muiz just, you talk with a kid and you can see the excitement sometimes. And like maybe he's kind of like me, that just brings the positivity all the time. And he's just pumped about getting another offer. But I know as a fact, he loves Coach Guyton, loves Pat Lambert, and he loves the potential in Madison. So those would probably be my 3. If I had to give one other different one, just looking at the list real quick, I'd probably go with Mason Alexander.
So I'm going to go with, I also agree, Davis and Posa. Posa is the guy that I want the most out of this list. I mean, that to me, that is number one on my list. But I'm going to go with Logan Powell.
So that's Rajeev's number one.
Yeah.
Justin, is yours Loftin?
Lofton's number one for me.
Okay.
I think that defensive line is the number one position for this team that has to be elevated going forward. And if he can play 5-tech for us and be a guy who can be a disruptive difference maker at that position, we have to get as many of them as we can, especially
Rajeev,
in a down year.
What are you feeling on Powell?
I just feel, I'll tell you what, I just have a feeling about this. Justin said he had a feeling about Jaden Woods. I got a feeling about Logan Powell. I don't have a feeling on Nolan Davenport. I have to tell you, to me, Nolan Davenport's not going to be a Badger. I just feel like Penn State is too deep on that, in my opinion, just from things that I've read out there. But I think Logan Powell's a guy that really, I feel like, yes, I know Alabama's in play, but I think Logan Powell just seems like a Wisconsin guy. I feel like I would not surprise me if we hit on him this weekend, truthfully. I feel like Logan Powell.
I'll tell you this. For Powell, and I think Jaden Woods, I put this visit for the utmost importance to them. You know what I mean? Like go. Powell has not been to Wisconsin, and Jaden Woods, I just spoke with him like 8 days ago, and I'm pretty good at this stuff at this point. And like maybe he's keeping things close, right? I respect that, but he's a guy. It just seems to me like the feel on campus and his building with staffs in Madison, in West Lafayette, in Happy Valley, wherever these visits are, they are going to be paramount in his decision.
Yeah. So that's the uncommitted list. So we also have committed guys coming. We're not going to talk about each and every one of them, but Jameer Scott will be here, Michael Roski, Sam Leteju, Cooper Catalano. We are going to talk quickly before we close the show about Cameron Miller. We haven't talked about Cameron Miller on this show. 3-star wide receiver out of Atco.
That's our guy.
5'11".
Me and Nick are going to tell Rajeev he's wrong.
Well, I'm curious. I'm going to let you guys start, and then I'm going to tell you why I think you guys, because I know you guys are both high on him. So, Justin, give me your thoughts on Cameron Miller. Give me your eval. Why do you like him so much?
I got to get some too, Justin.
My comparison to him, in terms of just the way he kind of moves on the field, was Chris Olave, and some people push back. And people need to understand when Chris Olave, yes, he was the top 12 pick, but he was also a 3-star when Ohio State got him. He's a little bit thinner frame, but he's a guy who is super explosive off the line. And that's what this kid has. His first 2 gears, there are very few guys that explode off the line the way he does. And that's how he beats angles. He is so fast and accelerating that people just really struggle to deal with him. Now, he's got a long ways to go before you talk about him in the same ceiling as what Olave did when he was at Ohio State. But I'm saying athletically, there are tools there that he can end up being a very, very productive wide receiver. I think he's a guy that can play in the slot, but I also think if you get some weight on him, he's capable of with how quick he is, that I think teams are legitimately going to be concerned with getting a press on him. Because if they miss it, whoever's covering him is just done. Like, you're not going to stay with him the first 20 feet. Now, you may be able to catch him in the long game, but I don't think you're going to be able to stay with him. He's going to beat you by a couple of yards right off the line.
All right, so I'm going to go next here, and then I'm going to let Nick come in with his thoughts on Cameron Miller. Look, so let me just say this, okay? Look, the guy is a speed demon. I agree with you. I mean, look, he literally outruns the camera on some of this film. Like I got it. Right? Like the guy can move. But I did not see. Listen, I'm all for guys coming here. I think Cameron Miller can be a very productive wide receiver. I'm just saying I need to see more out of him. I don't think the route running is necessarily elite. I don't think he's, you see a guy like Eugene Hilton, who we'll talk about next week. He can high point the ball. He's very good at ball control. I don't really feel like I'm seeing a ton of that from Cameron Miller right off the bat. The film just doesn't, to me, jump off the page as a guy with elite route running and elite, visibility and action and sort of ball, adjusting to the ball. I don't really feel like I see that. What I see is a speed demon. Okay. And I see a lot of physical tools, but I see a guy that doesn't necessarily translate to college wide receivers to play in the Big Ten against these guys. That you have to have elite route running and the ability to really high point the ball. I don't see that. Tell me I'm wrong, Nick. Convince me that I feel that this guy's going to be great.
Rajeev, I got the world of respect for you, my guy, but no,
I'm not wrong. You guys watch the film too. What are you seeing on there?
No. So here was my comparison, and I'm curious what you guys think of this. I only thought of it because I think that you can play him inside and outside, and his speed. Okay, this Cam Miller's not just going to be a special teams guy, and he's got more size than this guy. But just when we were talking about comparisons, I thought of a couple players. I like where you're coming from with Olave. I also like with just what he does with the ball of a guy like Darius Davis from TCU. Anytime that he has the ball in his hands, he is turning it into a 20-plus yard game. Now, I'll hear you, Rajeev, in that, sure, you could see some more of the things maybe from like you see from like a Eugene Hilton or some of these other wideouts, but I actually think that's more just a representation of kind of his circumstances. He plays with another future Power 5 wideout, and from what I can tell, his quarterback's pretty good. And
he's
so
a
like
four-star too, isn't he?
Yeah, they're a dang good program. And I got to speak with the coach last time. And man, Justin will speak to this. Like, even if we're texting, and I like his film. I'm pumped about this guy. Like, when I'm writing, I generally, I tell it how it is. I tell the readers, like, this is what I like. This area could use some growth. I'm always kind of considered in that terminology. Man, I watched his film a second time, Rajeev, even looking for some weaknesses. And I'm not saying he should be a 5-star kid, but like, I think he ends up a 4-star this fall. And to me, I think you see a ceiling close to that of a Will Pauling.
Yeah, I hear that. And I do actually, I don't disagree with that comment, actually, Nick, that the ceiling is a Will Pauling, because he has those physical tools. To me, I look at this like I look at Mason Alexander. I need to see more. I just generally, if I'm watching film, I'm like, okay, yeah, these things they're jumping off the page at me. Other than his speed, I didn't really see anything that jumped off the page at me with Miller. Look, I'm all for it. I'm not saying you're right. He absolutely could have a Will Pauling type ceiling. He could absolutely have a Tretch type ceiling, but I just don't. I just haven't seen it, and that's why I guess where I'm at with that.
Just quick question, Justin, because I know you're going to go deep. What about his vision when he has the ball in his hands?
Yes. As when you put the ball in his hands, I mean, how many on the huddle film did you see of bubble screens? Like, the guy was just doing it left and right. I get that. He absolutely is an electric guy, but when I'm talking about like top talent wide receiver, he's a slash kind of a player that should be able to translate, but I'm not as excited about him being a top wide receiver as you guys are. I guess that's just where I'm at. And I'm saying not yet. Justin vehemently disagrees with me. I know it.
Well, what I'm going to say is, no, I think there's this perspective difference on this. And I said this to Nick when him and I were talking about it. I think part of the issue when you watch his film is he's just too good for high school football. Like, he's easily separating against everybody that's on him. So the things that you're talking about with high pointing and stuff like that, it's like, well, he doesn't have to. He's separated by 3 yards or 4 yards on the guy, and they throw the ball, and it's like they can't stay with him. Like,
but can he do it when he has guys that can?
I think that I think his first 2 gears are legitimately elite even at the college level. I think that he will be very, very difficult to stay with for the first 20 yards. Now, there's going to be guys who are going to catch him when they throw the ball deep, unless he gets it probably in rhythm, or he's going to hold his lead, or he's going to probably give up a little bit, because there's going to be bigger guys that are going to track him down a little bit. But he's going to cause a ton of problems in that first 20 yards, because it's going to be really hard to stay with him. Because he accelerates so fast that if you come in and you try to press and he's running a fade on you and you miss that initial pump, he's gone. Like, he's going to be, even if you're sending a safety over to that side, unless you're actually rolled him to him, there's going to be a window there that he's going to be wide open for 50,
Justin,
yards.
I love talking ball with you guys, because we just hit the hour mark, fellas. And here is why I will go to bat. Not that you're not even saying like, oh, I don't think he'll be good. Like, that's very much registering with me. Here's why I would bet so much on his success. There are 2 things. Vision translates, number 1. Number 2, from what I can understand, now speaking with him like 4 or 5 times, following his recruitment, speaking with his teammate, helping that wideout, doing an interview with his coach, watching his commitment stuff. Guys, this kid's work ethic is off the charts. So am I saying he's going to be TO? Like,
No.
not necessarily. But do I honestly, in my heart, believe that after probably 4 seasons, this young kid, this young athlete can find his way to a day 2 NFL draft pick? I think there's potential. And the last thing I'll say, because I do need to get to more content for you guys, for both of you, I know, Justin, we touched on this once. This has been a blast, fellas. I hope you enjoy. Where do you like him at the next level? Not in terms of O or D, but where do you line him up?
Do you want my answer on this? Because there's been some disagreement.
I want both you guys. I'm not saying where do you think he'll end up, because I'm pretty confident in where I think, but where, if you were the coach, where would you?
If I was going to use him, he'd be on the outside. I want him one-on-one with a corner who's trying to get their hands on him, because if they miss, he is going to absolutely make them look stupid. And yes, I think there's some things you can do with him in the slot. I just think it devalues him a little bit if you put him in that position, because he's not going to be running down the field as much as I think he's capable of getting behind the defense.
What about you, Rajeev?
I slot all the way. I disagree, Justin. I don't think he's an outside guy at all. I think he's a slot guy. His size. I mean,
he's 5'11".
He's 5'11", and he's and like we mentioned with Will Pauling, I mean, he fits that build. I feel like that's where he's going to end up. His speed is elite. There's no doubt about that. When you're talking about the outside, you're talking about going up against outside type corners that can match that speed. He's not going to blow every corner in the Big Ten out of the water. Like, he's not really going to be able, just from what I've seen so far, I don't really see him as a guy that's going to be able to take an outside corner and get behind the defense.
Can I give my input quick? Because
yes,
we're
please.
I'm smiling. We're past the point of the content plan, and now we're just talking ball with friends, which is awesome. But, okay, let's say your offense has 70 snaps, a good in-shape wide out, a top 1 or 2 guy, we'll say 52 to 56 snaps at least. I personally, guys, would play Cam Miller, potentially in an offense like this, 40 to 43 snaps inside, 9 to 12 outside. Because I do think that he has burners. And that first step, Justin is higher than me on that second gear. I'm sorry, it was the gear that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But that first gear, that's untouchable.
Yeah, those slant patterns are going to be, unstoppable potentially. Hey, look, Nick agrees with me on something. That's nice. I like that. How about that? We will end the show there on Nick agreeing with me that he's going to be a slot guy. Nick OSEN, at The Real Nick OSEN. Give him a follow. Check out his work on Badger 247. Thank you so much for joining us. It was much longer than we expected, but it was great to do this. We are going to keep doing this, by the way. We have official visits coming up. Justin is committed to talking about official visits, and I love it.
And I'm committed
we're doing official.
Best thing I'm going to say on that one, Rajeev, I do think he plays in the slot, but that I would like to see him on the outside.
All right, fair enough. We'll leave it there, guys. And yeah, we're back next week talking about more official visits. We're also going to be talking about, we're only a few months away from the season. So Justin and I are going to be putting together some Know Your Foe type series. We're going to talk through all of our opponents in the 2024 season, talk about some changes that they've made on their teams and how they shape up and how they match up against the Badgers. With that, boys,
6.5 wins, too low.
Oh, way too low. Don't even get me started on that. We will be talking about that. That's crazy. With that, thanks for joining us, Nick, and on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Bucky Report or The Bucky Report Podcast from wherever you get your content. Until next time, on Wisconsin.